let's be clear. What does the budget this time mean for the Aam Aadmi? What is it that man who's, is it, there's jobs, which is the obvious thing that young India wants. And I think that's, but is it simply about how do you create this feel-good factor? There's been a sense that between 2009 and 14 in particular, there was a feel-bad factor of anything. There was a sense of negativism and pessimism. Modi, to his credit, has changed that. But has he been able to translate the rhetoric into reality? And I think today is a test of that. Would that be a way of looking at it, Gurcharan Das, that there is a sense of buoyancy, finally, but is that good? Big industry still invests outside India rather than in India. Their major projects are increasingly outside India than India. What is it going to take to change that?
I think that's very correct. That the demand, we need a demand pull also, rather than just a supply push. And one of the things that I wish Jaitley would do today, and Modi did it a little bit last night, or yesterday in the daytime, which is basically to essentially tell people, it's economics 1 little bit. In other words, what he has to do, what Margaret Thatcher used to do in England. She used to say that I spent only 20% of my time reforming and 80% of the time selling the reforms. So people still think that the reforms are about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. They still think that capitalism is equal to crony capitalism. They still, and that's why it's pathetic that our country, after 20 years or more of reforms, is still reforming by stealth. And therefore, what that feel-good factor for the people is to understand that this will translate into my life. That in fact, the land acquisition bill, they should have sold it as that a farmer also has a son who wants a job. And if you create jobs...
I take your point that there is a need to communicate the process. But, for example, many believe that GST is the game changer. And we've been hearing this for the last couple of years. And each time it's either been deferred or it's been caught in a political tangle. Now you've got a majority government, you've got a prime minister who claims that he's going to sort of push it through. Do you see that? Do you see Arun Jaitley today announcing in his budget that April 2016, I've got more or less a consensus, I'm going ahead with it? Is that the kind of the kind of one big idea? Because we use the word big bang. The one big idea that will, in a sense, enthuse people, create that feel-good factor.
No, that is a big idea as far as business is concerned.
Right.
It's not about the people.
As far as the consumer is concerned?
As far as the consumer is concerned, Rajdeep, I was trained as a Keynesian economist. And I remain an unreconstructed Keynesian, unlike...
So you need to create...
Unlike my friend
You need to create demand somewhere.
I don't know, but I guess you're more neoclassical than Keynesian. But one fundamental lesson that we were taught is that spending decisions are about expectations. It's not about current income, but it's about future income. Investment decisions are about expectations. It's what you expect that determines your behavior today, right? The expectations about India were positive till 2010.
Yes.
They turned negative in 2010. That's the story of the last decade. And I think the real challenge, in many ways being addressed, but needs to be addressed more convincingly, is to alter the state of expectations so that you and I feel more confident that tomorrow I will get better job. Even if I have a job today, I'll get a better job tomorrow. Or if I don't have a job today, then I'm likely to get a job tomorrow. I start spending, I start investing, and that is how the economy picks up.
So the challenge is to spur demand. I mean, somewhere in the last few years, we missed out. We missed an opportunity. Maybe, to be fair to the previous Prime Minister, the global situation wasn't quite what it is today. I mean, let's be clear, it's not just Achhe Din, there is Achhe Sitare as well. Narendra Modi has been benefited from the fact that in the last 8 months, oil prices have come down to astronomically low levels unexpectedly. So in that sense, he has an opportunity, maybe better targeted subsidies this time, ensure a cash delivery system that we now have in place. These are all opportunities for the finance minister.
There are many opportunities, Rajdeep, but I think to Sanjay's point, what is it that the Aam Aurat, the Aam Aadmi really wants? Right? We're not looking for a GDP growth rate. What you're saying is, how is my life getting better? Is the price of my vegetables getting lower? Are there enough schools and colleges for my children to get admission? When I go to a hospital, am I going to get good health care? What is happening to the price of my power and water? What is happening to my personal security? Are the courts going to hear my cases in time? What is happening to the pollution? What is happening to water security? I mean, these are things that we want to understand. And the other thing, I think, we've now disbanded our planning commission. Can we have more simplicity and transparency in our numbers? Can we move away from this plan and non-plan to simply what is capex and what is revenue? We're changing GDP numbers. I mean, today I heard Arun Subramaniam saying the GDP revisions are puzzling. I mean, I've been discussing that with Surjit. We've got these eminent economists. Maybe they can explain to this whole country what's happening. How do you jump from 5.0, 4.8 to 7.5 and things like that? Let's make this simple. Let's have a simple, clear, transparent budget.
Let's be clear. To that Aam Aadmi there, it doesn't make a difference if you tell me my inflation is has gone down to 6%. If when I go to buy my vegetables, the price of cauliflower and the price of brinjal has risen, or the price of tomato. No, let's be clear. I'm looking at it.
Give me a chance, I'll be clear.
Economists in a studio will undoubtedly have their own way of looking at the world. But the Aam Aadmi is looking at the world very differently. Before the Delhi elections, my driver comes to me and says, "Sir, अच्छे दिन तो नहीं आए that the price of cauliflower has gone up." I'm just saying somewhere, growth rate figures, if we get stuck in growth rate figures and we get stuck in inflation, will we be able to create that feel-good factor? How are you going to create that feel-good factor for that Aam Aadmi? Is it what Sanjay is suggesting? How do you create the expectation that tomorrow will be a better day?
If you give me a minute, I will illustrate what he can do and what needs to be done. Look, and I will try and integrate the Make in India, jobs, and whether the state should be telling us which sector to go into or not. I think the primary goal of our economy today is to increase economic freedom. And by economic freedom, I mean that people, producers and consumers are in a competitive framework. The world has shifted a hell of a lot in the last 10 years, let alone the last 30. We are no longer an island. We are no longer a subcontinent where we will determine our own rules of the game. So the first and foremost, and that's what Make in India is about. It is about economic freedom. It is basically decreasing the role of the bureaucracy and of the state. One last point over here, in terms of the state choosing sectors, whether extension services or agriculture or whatever. If you look at Korea in the 70s, where after their first burst of growth, they said, listen, we got to plan, okay? And we got to tell which sector the economy should go into. And they did that, and they found out that the one sector that absolutely outpaced every other sector was making of wigs, which is an area that the government was not involved in. Analogously, the same story with the software sector in India. It was a one sector the government was not involved in. So I think really the problem is the influence, the overriding influence of the state.
Can I for a moment get money? Just to get money, do you believe that this is an opportunity? And there has been consistent opportunity since 1991 to reduce the impact of state on the average individual's economic life. That somewhere we need to say, whether it's disinvestment, which is sort of makes the headlines of a coal India, but deep down inside, the Indian state has to realize that they need to withdraw from certain areas. That's one way to raise revenues, as we've seen in the past. That's one way to improve efficiencies, as we've seen in the past. Would you support that we've now reached a stage, surely, and the world has changed, as Surjit says, where you need the state to play a lesser role, focus on core areas, focus on health, focus on education,
and infrastructure.
And focus on infrastructure, solid private-public infrastructure projects that are done in time, not when in the UPA years when they simply were given clearances and never really materialized. Do you believe that's the opportunity?
I certainly believe that we should reduce the role of state regulations, but be careful that we don't do it in areas which have long-term adverse consequences, such as environment. But at the same time, as you reduce the role of the overweening state, you have to increase the empowerment of the lowest institutions of governance in this country, which are the Panchayati Raj institutions. And what I find completely wrong about the current model of cooperative federalism as defined by the Modi government is that it involves only center-state relations and does not deal with center-state local government.
But it's a start. Let's be clear that the
wait a
fiscal
minute.
federal. Let's be clear the fiscal
No,
federal
I'm sorry.
model is
I'm sorry. It is a start, but a wrong start, if you only reduce the role of the central government and do not increase the role of the panchayats.
Okay.
Now, in these circumstances, we have to remember that the feel-good factor is different in Nariman Point and Malabar Hill to the farms, where you have 1.1% growth. I'm stressing this. In rural India, if you have, and specifically in order to
No, but you've got to look
in
at
agriculture and allied activities, if our growth rate is 1.1% and there's a need to reach 7% in the next 2 years, if we are going to reach the 12th plan target of 4% over the period, then we are in a very feel-bad situation. But unfortunately, even here, we've got the Kulak represented, but not the Khet Mazdoor. And I have been asking you on...
Just a minute. No, Ajay, I'll get it. I just want to, for a moment, there are lots of viewers who will basically look at our budget programming from the point of view of taxes. That's the way the average Indian looks at it. He wants to know, mera tax bachega ya nahi? That's all he wants to know from Arun Jaitley. So we've created today a special tax set.